Storytime with Mr. Michael.
Hello, my friends. I hope you are excited for Chapter 2 of Frog and Toad Are Friends. I'm going to start reading it to you right now. I wanted to also talk about other Arnold Lobel books that I love a lot, like Mouse Soup, which I have somewhere around here. Here it is. Like Mouse Soup, which is a really great one with lots of different stories in it, and the Fable stories, and they're just all great. I really enjoy the Arnold Lobel books. So here we go, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called The Story. One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you are looking quite green." "But I always look green," said Frog. "I am a frog." "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. "Get into my bed and rest." Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I'm resting." "All right," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. "I will go on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. "Perhaps that will help me think of a story." Toad walked up and down the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Do you see him? There he is, walking up and down. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me think of a story," said Toad. And Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. There he is on his head. Wow. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. And Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Splash. Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. "Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me think of a story," said Toad. "Well, I'm feeling better now, Toad," said Frog. "I do not think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?" "Yes," said Toad, "if you know one." Oh, poor Toad. He's all dizzy and discombobulated. "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he could not think of a story. Then Toad did not feel well, so the frog was feeling better. So Toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end. How was that? "Toad?" said Frog, but Toad did not answer because he had fallen asleep. Here he is. Poor guy. Our next story in Frog and Toad Are Friends is A Lost Button. I wonder what that one's about. I'm going to guess a lost button. I hope you guys liked that story. I feel bad for Toad during that one. He is trying so very hard to make his friend feel better, but he just can't seem to think of a story. He bangs his head, and I think that probably hurt him a lot. He poured water over him, which made him very cold, and he walked outside up and down the porch, but he could not think of a story. I think if I was thinking a story, I would think, what is one thing I know that Frog likes? And I would tell him a story about that. That may be what I would do. I would like to know what you would like to hear a story about. If you have an idea for a story that Mr. Michael could make up for you, throw it in the comment section. That would be super fun. And then we can make up our own Toad story. Okay. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. I care about you, and I'll see you next time, okay? Goodbye for now.
Story time with Mr. Michael.